Sue is a very famous businesswoman. She receives an invitation to attend her ex-husband's mother's birthday party, so she decides to go shopping for the occasion. At the party, she runs into her ex-husband's mother, who embarrasses her by saying that her dress is beautiful, but that her handbag ruined its elegance. However, Sue doesn't pay attention to her remarks, thanks her, and walks away. Later, she bumps into her ex-husband by coincidence. It's revealed that in the divorce settlement, she received a luxurious hotel in an upscale area as alimony. He congratulates her on the hotel and on the new branch she plans to open in Cuba. He tries to talk to her further in an attempt to reconcile, but she cuts him off, advising him to focus on his own life. He leaves and Sue gets into her car. Her secretary informs her about a conference in Cuba regarding her new hotel, which she needs to attend. Sue looks at a picture of a sunset in Cuba, finds it breathtaking, and agrees to go to the conference. The next day, she boards a plane headed to the city. Meanwhile, we see a man who enjoys photography and cherishes an old camera that holds many memories. After finishing a photo shoot, he goes to sit and read his favorite book. Sue and her secretary arrive in Cuba and take a car driven by a careless driver who is distracted by his phone. Suddenly, he swerves to avoid another car, but ends up hitting a table where the photographer is sitting, causing his belongings to fall and his camera to break. Sue hears the commotion, and she asks her secretary to compensate the man for any damages. The secretary approaches him and offers to replace his camera, but he refuses, explaining that it holds sentimental value. She gives him her business card and tells him to contact her if he changes his mind. He remains upset as he collects his things, while Sue heads to her hotel. At the conference, Sue presents her hotel's second branch. After the presentation, the conference chairman shows her some beautiful natural spots in Cuba, including a famous sunset view. He encourages her to visit the area to see it in person. Meanwhile, the photographer is sitting and reading his book when a little girl approaches him and drags him to dance with her in the street. While dancing, Sue's secretary notices him by coincidence and admires his character. She tells Sue that the man refused compensation because of the sentimental value of his camera. Later, Sue and her secretary return to the hotel. Feeling the need for a change of scenery, Sue decides to go out. Her secretary jokingly suggests that Sue should spend time with a boyfriend instead of her. Annoyed, Sue ends the conversation and takes a sleeping pill to help her rest. However, as she looks at a picture of the sunset, she recalls the chairman's words about its beauty in real life. Inspired, she decides to go see it herself. She asks a hotel employee for directions and a ride to the location. On the way, the car breaks down, so Sue has to walk the rest of the way. After walking for a while, her feet hurt and she stops to rest. Suddenly, thieves appear, steal her handbag, and run away, leaving her upset. Determined, she continues her journey to the sunset spot. When she finally arrives, she is exhausted and affected by the sleeping pill she took earlier, making her feel very drowsy. Just before Sue falls over the railing, the man happens to be in the same place by coincidence and catches her in time. He lets her rest on his shoulder while he notices her shoe slipping off her foot. He tries to save the shoe, but it falls. He stays with her, waiting until she wakes up. When she wakes up, she finds herself lying against the man whose camera was broken. She recognizes him, but doesn't reveal that she was in the car that hit his table. Surprised, she asks him what happened. He explains that she was about to fall over the railing and tells her that her shoe fell off while she was asleep. Sue looks at the sunset and is captivated by the view. He hands her his headphones and plays some music. After the sunset, he goes down to retrieve her shoe and brings it back to her. She thanks him for his help and tells him she wants to repay his kindness. He replies that he was lucky to spend his last day in the city with a beautiful woman who fell asleep on his shoulder. He prepares to leave, but she stops him and asks if he has any money. Smiling, he asks what she wants. She glances at two people drinking soda nearby and says she wants a bottle like theirs. He laughs, tells her to wait, and goes to get the soda. They sit together, drinking and chatting. Afterward, as they prepare to leave, he notices her foot is injured because of her shoes. He suggests she take them off and walk barefoot to avoid further injury. She jokes that it would look ridiculous to walk in the street without shoes. He then removes his own shoes and says he'll walk barefoot too, so she won't feel embarrassed. She laughs, takes off her shoes, and they walk together until they find a car to take her back to the hotel. While walking, he buys her a pair of slippers to ease her pain. As they continue, He notices her holding her stomach and realizes she's hungry. She asks if he has enough money for food, and he smiles, saying he has enough for both of them. They go to a nearby restaurant, enjoy a meal, and while there, Sue notices an advertisement for a dance party happening nearby. She asks him if he has enough money to take her there as well. He checks his bag, counts his money, and reassures her they can go. At the dance party, he starts dancing and later invites her to join. At first, she hesitates, feeling shy, but eventually she gives in and has a great time. After the party, they walk together, and she asks for his number so she can repay him for all the money he spent. He tells her he didn't do it for her number or any repayment. He simply enjoyed spending time with her. She smiles, and as they stand near the car, he tells her he hopes to see her again tomorrow at the same restaurant at 9 o'clock. She replies that she might be busy and may not make it on time. He says he'll wait an extra half hour, but if she doesn't show up, he'll leave. She agrees, gets into the car, and drives off. Unknown to her, he still has her shoes, and he decides to return them when they meet again. When Sue arrives at her hotel, she finds her secretary has been calling her repeatedly, but received no response. Sue tells her about her bag being stolen and everything inside it being lost. She heads to her room, lost in thought, reminiscing about the words the man said and the day they spent together. At the same time, he's also lost in thought, recalling their time together. The next day, he arrives at the restaurant at 9 o'clock and waits for Sue. She's busy with work and hurries her staff to finish so she can leave, but she ends up running late. By the time she gets there, he has already left. He rushes to catch the train to the airport to return to his home country. At the airport, they unexpectedly see each other again. They exchange glances and he walks away, sitting down to wait for his flight. Sue approaches him, apologizing for being late to their meeting and again for being the reason his camera was broken. She admits she didn't want to tell him earlier that she was in the car that hit his table. She offers to compensate him for everything he did by booking him a first-class plane ticket, but he declines, saying he prefers to pay for his own travels. She agrees, thanks him for all he did, and walks away. While looking at the secretary's business card, he decides to search for the hotel Sue was staying in. He discovers that she is the owner of the hotel, which surprises him greatly. Shortly after, he receives a call from the same hotel, informing him that he has been accepted for a job he applied for earlier. Shocked, he looks at Sue as she walks away and realizes that he will now be working under her. Later, we learn that he had applied to the hotel some time ago and had just been accepted. He returns home to surprise his mother and family with the news that he got a prestigious job. They are all overjoyed for him. He then meets up with his friends to share the news, and they celebrate with him. Among his friends is his close female friend who secretly loves him, but he sees her only as a friend and nothing more. A month later, he arrives at the hotel to start his new job. Sue's secretary notices him and is shocked to see him among the new employees. Sue then enters the conference room to welcome the new recruits and deliver a speech. When she sees him sitting among the new employees, she's taken aback and recalls the incidents they shared. Her pause confuses the staff, but she quickly regains her composure and continues her speech, maintaining professionalism. After her talk, Sue heads to her office and asks her secretary to bring her the files of the new employees. When she looks through his file, she learns more about him: his simple background, his family's fruit shop, and his childhood love for a specific children's playground. Curious about the place, Sue decides to visit it. She finds the playground with old swings and other equipment. As she reminisces about her own childhood, she sits on the swing for a while. He happens to see her there by coincidence and is surprised. He calls out to her and she feels a bit awkward. They approach each other and he asks how she knew about the place. She explains that she saw it in his resume and was curious. The next day, he hangs out with his co-workers from the hotel. They sit together, drink sodas, and enjoy their time until they've had their fill. Later, as he tries to head home, he's completely drunk and struggles to walk. By coincidence, Sue spots him while driving her car. At first, she decides to ignore him and drives past, but she feels bad and turns back to help. She picks him up and drives him home. While in the car, he makes a mess and slurs his words, embarrassing himself. When they reach his house before getting out of the car, he insists on giving her food as thanks, even though he's clearly still intoxicated. He tells her that the food helps with concentration, then steps out of the car and heads into his house. Sue drives off, smiling and laughing to herself. The next day, Kim wakes up and sits with his parents, recalling everything that happened with his boss, Sue, the previous night. Embarrassed, he quickly gets ready and rushes to work. When he arrives at the hotel, he is lost in thought about what happened. Sue's secretary notices him and says, "She's waiting for you," which surprises him and makes him nervous. Eventually, he musters the courage to go to her office. Sitting before her, he is extremely embarrassed and apologizes profusely for his behavior the previous night. She laughs it off and tells him she understands because he wasn't in his right mind. To lighten the mood, she says, "I might forgive you if you agree to let me treat you to lunch at a restaurant." Kim agrees. And the next day, Sue picks him up in her car and takes him to a nice place to eat. Throughout the meal, she playfully teases him, reminding him of the silly things he said and did while drunk. They laugh together, and after they finish eating, Kim offers to drive so she can relax. When they reach his home, he parks the car and tells her he really enjoyed spending time with her. Feeling a bit self-conscious, he says she might be embarrassed to go out with an employee. To lighten the mood, he writes his phone number on his hand and takes a photo of it with her phone, saying, "Here's my number." He then steps out of the car, and Sue drives away, smiling and feeling very happy. The next day, during a meeting, Sue's secretary interrupts and shows her a piece of breaking news. Sue is shocked as she looks at her phone. The news spreads throughout the hotel, showing photos of her with a man, accompanied by rumors that she was on a romantic date. Although Kim's face isn't clearly visible in the pictures, he recognizes the situation and becomes deeply concerned about her reputation. We learn that Sue had signed a divorce agreement stating that she could not enter a new relationship to protect her ex-husband's family's reputation. If it appeared that she had, her ex-husband's family could use it against her, potentially stripping her of assets or damaging her career. Sue's secretary reminds her of the clause in the divorce agreement, saying, "This is going to ruin your life." Sue insists that the man in the photo is just an employee who helped her and that there's nothing romantic between them. The secretary tells her she must fire Kim to put an end to the rumors. Frustrated, Sue tells her to back off and storms out. Later, Sue's ex-mother-in-law confronts her, stating that being part of their family means she'll always be under their control, even after the divorce. Sue snaps back, declaring, "I'm no longer part of your family and you have no right to dictate my life." Her ex-mother-in-law replies, "Once you've been in this family, you'll always be part of it. I'm just trying to protect our reputation." Sue, furious, decides to meet her ex-husband to discuss the matter. She tells him about his mother's threats and demands that he tell her to stay out of her life. "Stop hiring people to spy on me," she says before leaving. Feeling guilty, her ex-husband confronts his mother, asking her to stop interfering in Sue's life. His mother, however, defends her actions, saying she's trying to bring them back together. She adds, "You still haven't remarried because you still love her, don't you?" He hesitates before admitting, "That's not the point. Just stay away from her work, her success, and stop using people to watch her." He leaves, frustrated, as his mother watches him in silence. After returning home, Kim tries to sleep, but he can't stop thinking. He turns on the radio and coincidentally hears the same song he listened to with Sue during the sunset. Lost in thought, he decides to go back to her at the hotel. Late at night, he goes to his friend's place and borrows his work car, which is quite small, and begins his journey back to the hotel. Kim arrives at Sue's door and knocks while she is asleep. Hearing the sound, Sue wakes up, confused, and looks through the peephole. Seeing Kim standing there, she's even more surprised. She opens the door and asks why he has come back. He quickly makes up an excuse, saying he noticed a restaurant near the hotel that serves amazing food and thought they should try it together. Sue realizes he's bluffing and asks, "That's the reason you traveled all this way?" Kim replies, "Yes." And after thinking for a moment, she agrees. They head out together. While spending time with him, Sue reflects on the things he said during dinner. She worries that their relationship might deepen, leading to more rumors and problems for her life. Despite her concerns, she whispers to herself while he's asleep, admitting how much she values their friendship. Kim's phone rings, waking him up. He realizes he had fallen asleep on her shoulder. Embarrassed, he apologizes, and Sue jokingly teases him about how heavy his head was. They laugh and continue their conversation. Meanwhile, Sue's ex-husband is writing her a message on the gift he bought for her upcoming birthday. He hands the gift to one of the hotel staff to deliver it to Sue later. Down in the hotel garage, Kim sees Sue sitting in her car with someone else. He feels a pang of jealousy, believing she might be involved with another man. Later, Kim learns that Sue had been waiting for a painter to collect artwork for display in the hotel. Kim visits the artist's studio and discovers that Sue's ex-mother-in-law had instructed the artist to disappear and not hand over the paintings. Kim speaks to the artist, convincing her to call Sue and arrange a meeting to deliver the artwork. The artist agrees and Kim feels relieved. Sue meets the artist and is surprised to receive the paintings, realizing Kim's involvement. Meanwhile, Kim confronts his mother again, frustrated by her interference. He tells her, "You can't force someone to return to our family against their will. I won't allow this." His mother grows angry and becomes even more determined to sabotage Sue's life. Later, Sue's secretary gives Kim a gift, explaining that Sue didn't accept it and wanted to return it herself, but was too busy. Kim graciously takes the gift, smiling to hide his embarrassment. Back at work, Kim overhears his colleagues talking and learns that Sue's birthday is the next day. He starts thinking of ways to make her happy. However, Sue meets the artist again and refuses to accept the paintings, having learned about the manipulative tactics used to secure them. Despite the artist's attempts to convince her otherwise, Sue is resolute in her decision and leaves the meeting. Kim finishes his work and returns home to spend time with his family in front of the TV. While watching the news, he sees a report showing a blurred photo of Sue with an unknown man. The man's outfit closely resembles Kim's, and Kim's brother notices, asking if Kim knows the woman in the photo. Kim, feeling nervous, denies any connection and insists he has never met her. Later, we find out that Sue's ex-mother-in-law was behind the photo leak. She had been secretly following Sue and documenting her every move, aiming to cause a major scandal. She instructs her secretary to meet with a close friend who owns a media outlet to strike a deal to publish defamatory articles about Sue. The secretary complies and contacts Kim's friend to orchestrate the plan. While Sue is on the phone discussing the situation, Kim overhears her and learns she's planning to go out. As she leaves, she tells him to head home on his own. Kim waits at the bus stop, but Sue coincidentally spots him while driving past in her car. Initially, she ignores him and continues driving. However, lost in thought, she doesn't notice a car in front of her, forcing her to stop abruptly. This results in another car rear-ending her. Kim notices the commotion on the road and runs over to help, realizing Sue is involved. He resolves the situation with the driver who hit her, giving him his contact information and offering to cover the repair costs once the damages are assessed. Kim then drives Sue home in her car to ensure she doesn't strain herself further. When they near her house, Sue insists on walking the rest of the way alone to avoid any paparazzi spotting them together and sparking more rumors. Kim checks his watch and realizes it's almost midnight. He decides to wish her a happy birthday and give her a small gift. Sue is surprised and feels awkward. She tells him she cannot accept the gift and expresses discomfort about their growing relationship. She wishes he would distance himself from her. Kim is deeply hurt by her words but doesn't argue. Instead, he steps out of the car to switch seats, letting Sue drive herself the rest of the way. After Kim leaves, Sue reflects on her words and feels guilty for hurting his feelings. She calls out to him and extends her hand from the car window. Kim returns and hands her the gift again. This time, Sue accepts it, explaining she didn't want to hurt him further. She smiles faintly before driving away. Meanwhile, Kim's friend, the one contacted by the ex-mother-in-law's secretary, refuses to publish the defamatory article. She angrily objects, telling the secretary to leave Kim alone and not cause harm. She is upset because she has feelings for Kim, but knows he cares about someone else. Later, Sue's secretary visits her to celebrate her birthday. Noticing the gift from Kim, she asks who gave it to her. When Sue mentions Kim's name, her secretary is surprised and suggests returning it. Sue declines taking the gift, and the secretary leaves, still puzzled by Sue's emotions toward Kim. Shortly after, Sue meets with her ex-mother-in-law, who gives her a gift intended for her daughter. She expresses her desire for Sue and her son to rekindle their relationship and get back together as they were before. Sue's mother suggests trying to repair the relationship with her ex-husband's family. Sue takes the gift from her ex-mother-in-law and gives it to her parents, explaining that it's from the ex-mother-in-law who hopes to mend things. However, Sue shows little interest in the matter, and they continue their evening as usual. Later, Sue returns to her hotel. While leaving, she encounters her ex-husband's business manager. He speaks loudly, attempting to embarrass her in front of the staff, and questions her about the man she was seen with. Sue firmly replies that her personal life is none of his business. The manager reminds her of the clause in her divorce contract and accuses her of tarnishing her ex-husband's family's reputation. Kim intervenes, trying to defuse the situation. In front of everyone, he casually invites Sue out for a meal, as he did previously. The staff overhear and realize that Kim is the mysterious man spending time with Sue. They are shocked, and Kim's friend, who secretly harbors feelings for him, is disheartened by the revelation. However, she smiles at Kim and jokes that she'll pay for the meal this time. Kim and Sue head out together. During their meal, Kim tries to comfort Sue, telling her not to care about what others think and reassuring her of her worth. Sue is surprised by his sincerity, but remains silent. After their meal, they get into the car, and Kim asks about the artist she was dealing with. Sue explains that she found the artist but decided to cancel the deal. Kim agrees it was a good decision and mentions an art exhibition in his neighborhood, suggesting they visit it together if she's interested. Sue smiles but jokes about how they could go out again after the public scene at the hotel. Kim reassures her that she's done nothing wrong and encourages her to live confidently. After dropping him off near his home, Sue smiles, feeling more at ease. Kim stops by a restaurant and is surprised to see Sue's secretary there. They sit and chat, during which the secretary reveals that Sue has faced many challenges and explains the strict clauses in her divorce agreement, which forbid her from entering a new relationship to protect her ex-husband's family's reputation. This revelation leaves Kim feeling upset and sympathetic towards Sue. The next day, Sue confidently returns to the hotel, ignoring the gossip around her. She goes about her day as usual. Meanwhile, Kim arrives at the hotel, visibly anxious. He tries to stay composed as he heads to his office, aware that all the staff are whispering about him being the mysterious man seen with Sue. Kim's close friend at the hotel feels guilty because she knows who has been following and photographing them. Just as she is about to reveal the truth to Kim, they are interrupted by a work meeting. Afterward, Kim's colleague invites him to lunch. They head to the restaurant, but Kim becomes uncomfortable as he notices all the staff staring and whispering about him. Feeling overwhelmed, Kim excuses himself, saying he has no appetite and leaves the hotel. He goes to a cafe alone, visibly upset. By chance, Sue spots him from a distance. Although she realizes he's feeling down, she doesn't approach him. Instead, she sends him a message asking where he is. Kim tells Sue that he felt uncomfortable at the hotel and needed some time alone, adding that he's been thinking about skipping work altogether. He suggests they visit the art exhibit he mentioned earlier. After some thought, Sue agrees, wanting to lift his spirits. Kim quickly heads home to change clothes, surprising his mother by returning early. She asks why he's home so soon, and he explains that he has an appointment. After getting ready, Kim meets Sue, and they walk together. Sue asks about the art exhibit, so Kim takes her to a spot under a bridge where paintings are displayed on the columns. Sue is amazed by the artwork, and as they walk, they come across a painting that initially seems incomprehensible. Kim shares his philosophical take on the painting, saying that while he didn't understand it at first, he later realized it had a profound meaning. As he talks, he casually places his hand on her shoulder. Sue teases him, asking if he's gotten so used to putting his hand there. Embarrassed, Kim apologizes and removes his hand. He then invites her to a meal at his friend's restaurant. Sue hesitates but eventually agrees. At the restaurant, they are surprised to see Sue's secretary, who had forgotten her wallet there. They all sit together to eat, but Kim's brother unexpectedly arrives. He is shocked to see that Kim is the mysterious man spending time with Sue. Kim introduces them, but his brother remains stunned. After finishing their meal, Sue and her secretary leave. while Kim returns home. He notices the stuffed teddy bear Sue gave him earlier and finds himself thinking about her. Meanwhile, Sue is in the car with her secretary, feeling emotional. She confesses that she dreamed of living a peaceful, problem-free life and had wanted to meet someone like Kim earlier, but their timing was always wrong. Her secretary listens sympathetically, unable to find the right words to comfort her. Later, Sue's secretary revisits the artwork she and Sue had admired earlier. While standing there deep in thought, Kim arrives, surprised to find her there. He jokes about how they keep running into each other, suggesting it might be fate. The secretary looks at him briefly before turning her attention back to the painting. Kim takes her hand and confesses that he wants to be with her. Surprised by his words, she hesitates but eventually smiles and agrees to start a relationship with him. Kim is overjoyed and suggests they take a romantic bike ride. They ride the bike to a cafe where they celebrate and enjoy each other's company. The next day, Sue visits a clothing store to buy a gift for her father. Before leaving, she spots a tie that reminds her of Kim and decides to get it for him, despite its simplicity. When Kim receives the tie, he's touched that she thought of him. Later, as the grand opening of the hotel approaches, the staff prepare the reception hall for journalists and important guests. Sue arrives at the hotel but avoids greeting anyone at the entrance, staying out of the public eye. Kim's mother tells him Sue might be busy, but Kim dismisses her comment and walks away. Later, Sue spots Kim walking in the hotel and stops him to thank him for all his help. She notices he's not wearing the tie she bought for him and asks why. She adds, "By the way, it wasn't free, I paid for it." Kim pulls the tie out of his pocket, explaining that he's tried wearing it several times, but couldn't get it to look right. He's wearing a different tie because it's easier to manage. Sue laughs and tells him to take off the tie he's wearing. When he does, she helps him put on the one she bought for him. Unbeknownst to them, Kim's mother spots them from a distance and seems shocked. To avoid embarrassing them, she turns and walks away. Later, Kim heads back to oversee the hotel's grand opening preparations. Meanwhile, Sue encounters her ex-husband's mother, who calls her over and makes some hurtful remarks. Sue overhears this by chance and feels upset, wanting to intervene, but her secretary stops her to avoid creating unnecessary drama. Together, they leave the scene. Before the opening ceremony begins, Kim steps out of the hotel feeling deeply upset. One of his close friends finds him and asks why he's so down. Kim explains that his ex-mother-in-law insulted him harshly and says, "Imagine Sue living with this woman all that time enduring her words. I only spoke to her for 5 minutes and I'm already hurt." His friend sympathizes with him but advises him to stay away from Sue to avoid further entanglement with her difficult family. The grand opening ceremony begins and Sue speaks to the media about the hotel. After her speech, a journalist asks her about her relationship with the man she's often seen with. She becomes visibly uncomfortable and says she's not obligated to answer such personal questions. However, the reporter persists, claiming there are rumors that the man is stalking her. Kim overhears this from a distance and tries to calm Sue with reassuring gestures. However, Sue gets angry at the reporter's insinuations and, in front of everyone, declares that the man isn't stalking her, he's her boyfriend. The audience, including Kim, is stunned. Kim, however, can't hide his happiness and smiles warmly at her. After the press conference, Sue calls Kim and invites him to dinner. He smiles while sitting with his colleagues, and later they meet at a restaurant. During their time together, Kim confesses his love for her and they enjoy a wonderful evening. Later, Sue receives a message from her secretary informing her of an urgent shareholders meeting for the hotel chain due to her public statement during the opening. Nervous, Sue attends the meeting and apologizes for discussing her personal life at the event. However, the shareholders don't readily accept her apology. One of the investors, who happens to be her ex-husband's business manager, accuses her of tarnishing the hotel's reputation with the rumors about her relationship. Sue retorts sharply, telling him to mind his own business and declaring that her personal life is hers to live as she sees fit. She adds, "Next time, hold meetings for more important matters," before walking out, leaving him embarrassed in front of everyone. Angered, the manager later approaches Kim and threatens him. He demands that Kim transfer to another hotel to avoid ruining both his and Sue's futures. After delivering the threat, he walks away, leaving Kim deep in thought. Kim sits at home, torn between staying at the hotel and causing trouble for Sue, or leaving to avoid creating problems for her. Unable to decide, he goes out for a run, trying to clear his mind, but all he can think about is Sue. Eventually, he finds himself running toward her neighborhood, wanting to see her. He arrives by chance near her house, where they meet unexpectedly. Sue invites him inside and asks, "What brings you here at this time?" Kim admits that he missed her terribly and couldn't even look at a photo of her to ease the feeling. He moves closer and takes several photos of them together, but doesn't mention that he's been reassigned to another hotel. He wants to keep those photos as a memory of her. Afterward, Kim returns home and spends the night thinking about Sue and what life would be like with her far away. The next day, he goes to the hotel for what will be his last day there. His friend notices how sad he looks and calls Sue to inform her that one of the investors forced Kim to transfer to another hotel in the chain. Sue becomes furious upon hearing this, especially since Kim will have to leave her hotel. She cancels the work trip she was supposed to go on and immediately contacts the investor, summoning him to her office. When the investor arrives, Sue threatens him, warning that he should mind his own business or risk losing his shares in the hotel. The investor retorts, "Do you even know who's backing me?" Sue firmly replies, "Tell whoever is backing you to face me directly," and ends the conversation, walking out. Kim learns that Sue found out about his transfer and plans to bring him back to her hotel. Concerned about her future, he goes to her office and insists that she let him go through with the transfer. He explains that he'll return after proving himself at the new hotel, where people will respect him for standing on his own. Sue is heartbroken but reluctantly agrees. Kim leaves the hotel that evening to avoid making Sue even sadder. His friend accompanies him to help him settle into the new hotel. Meanwhile, Sue and her secretary sneak into a New Year's Eve party disguised in costumes. Sue feels lonely as the partygoers dance and celebrate, but she keeps to herself. As the countdown to the new year begins, she's surprised when someone grabs her hand. She turns to see Kim, who takes her outside and removes his mask, revealing his face. Sue is shocked and smiles at him. They spend the rest of the evening together, and Kim returns to her hotel to resume his work by her side. His colleagues warmly welcome him back, happy to see him again. As time passes, Kim and Sue's relationship grows stronger, and they become even more deeply in love. One day, they go out for a simple meal at a humble spot and enjoy each other's company. Sue eventually falls asleep from exhaustion, so Kim drives her home in her car. As they arrive, Sue's ex-husband sees them together and becomes furious. Later, Sue's ex-husband, Young, goes to her house to deliver a gift, attempting for the 100th time to reconcile with her. However, Sue rejects him again, humiliating him in the process. Angered, Young returns to his company and summons his mother's assistant, who owns shares in Sue's hotel. When the assistant arrives, Young demands to buy all of his shares, intending to gain full control of Sue's hotel and make himself the CEO. The assistant agrees and sells him the shares. Kim spends more time with Sue, enjoying their moments together as they take many photos and walk around, feeling happy. He shares some very sad stories with her, making her feel emotional. She tells him, "You made me happy, then you made me sad," and walks away. Kim follows her, grabs her hand, and places it in his pocket. He pulls something out of his pocket, and Sue, curious, opens it to find rings inside. She is surprised and delighted. She wears one of the rings, and Kim speaks to her in a romantic way. Sue is moved and starts to tear up, then smiles and embraces him. They continue their day together, and afterward, they each go home, lost in thought about each other. The next day, Sue's mother is upset because Sue forgot her birthday. Kim surprises her by arranging a special day at the hotel where he works, inviting her to a meal in the hotel's restaurant for her birthday. Sue is touched and happy that Kim remembered her special day. They go to the hotel, and Sue is amazed by its beauty. She tells her husband that even the elevator seems to be high-end, carefully designed. However, she doesn't know that the person who owns the hotel and the one who's with them now is actually Sue's mother-in-law, who she recalls from the news and photos online. As they reach the floor, they have trouble getting out, and then they're greeted by Kim, who welcomes them. Sue looks at her mother-in-law and recognizes her, realizing who she is. They all sit down in the restaurant, and Kim gives his mother a gift. She's thrilled and says, "You've already reserved us a spot in such a fancy hotel, and now you've even bought me a gift." Kim smiles and says, Nothing is too much for you, dear. A hotel staff member approaches and offers them expensive caviar, saying it's a gift from the hotel's owner. Kim is displeased by this gesture, warning the staff member to stay away if he doesn't want any trouble. Kim reassures Sue, promising to protect her no matter what happens. The next day, Jung holds a meeting with the investors who bought shares in the hotel. They vote on whether he should be appointed as the hotel's CEO, and by luck, Sue is absent from the meeting. Jung wins the vote and becomes the new CEO. Later, he meets with Sue and tells her that he is now in charge of the hotel. Sue is upset and asks, "What do you want from me?" Jung replies, "I just want to be close to you to protect you." Sue firmly rejects him, saying, "There's nothing between us for you to be concerned about," and tells him to take his leave. Jung, frustrated, walks away and heads to Kim's office. He introduces himself as the new CEO and stares at Kim with a cold expression, which Kim calmly handles. Afterward, Kim drives Sue home, trying to keep her calm as she pretends not to be upset. She jokes around with him, trying to maintain a light mood, while Kim stays composed. Later that evening, Kim talks to his family, telling them he wants to invite Sue for dinner at his house. His mother agrees, and he sends Sue a message with the details. The next day, Kim tells Sue that she's invited to his house for dinner, and he'll cook for her. Sue thinks for a moment and agrees. She then goes to her secretary and informs her that tomorrow marks the anniversary of her ex-husband's father's death, and she has to attend the memorial because her divorce agreement states she must attend any event for her ex-husband's family. Sue is nervous and doesn't know what to do, whether she should skip Kim's dinner invitation and risk upsetting him, or go to the memorial and cause herself even more problems. On the same day, Kim runs into Sue's driver by chance. He smiles and tells the driver that he'll see him tomorrow for the anniversary memorial of his father's death. Kim leaves and thinks about how he's creating a problem for Sue, as he didn't want to make things harder for her. He tells the driver that he wants him to drive Sue home today. The driver agrees, and Kim tells Sue that the dinner has been postponed because his mother suddenly became ill. Sue is confused, but she says nothing. She goes home, feeling conflicted about attending her ex-husband's family event. The next day, Sue goes to the hotel and sits at her desk. She enters the secretary's office and realizes that Kim lied about the dinner. His mother wasn't sick at all. Sue understands that Kim had done this to protect her, so she wouldn't get hurt by attending the anniversary event for her ex-husband's family. She feels deeply upset by his actions. She thinks back to the way her ex-husband's family treated her, and how they had always been unkind to her. Sue then decides to send her secretary to the memorial in her place, and she herself decides to attend the family event, telling the driver to take the secretary to the memorial. Meanwhile, reporters, believing Sue was in the car, chase after the vehicle. Kim is at his home preparing for the meal with his family. When the doorbell rings, he opens the door and is surprised to see Sue standing there. They share an emotional moment, and Kim tells her that now he truly understands how much she loves him. He promises to always be by her side and face their challenges together. Sue is welcomed by his family, and everyone is pleased to see her. Meanwhile, the secretary, who is at the memorial, is greeted by the journalists, who are surprised that Sue isn't the one who showed up. The secretary explains that Sue couldn't attend because she had another appointment, then leaves the memorial and heads back. Back at Kim's house, his family enjoys the meal, and Sue feels deeply moved by the warmth and happiness around her. She reflects on how different things are with Kim's family as they come from a different social background, but she chooses to ignore the differences for now. After dinner, Kim drives Sue back to her home. The next day, Kim goes to the hotel where there's a photo shoot for a couple, to make advertisements for the hotel. However, there's an issue when the photographer suddenly feels unwell and has been in the bathroom for the past 3 hours. Kim's friend suggests that since Kim is good at photography, he could take over the task. The team agrees, and Kim starts the photo shoot for the couple professionally. While he's taking pictures, Sue happens to walk by and watches them. She imagines herself in the moment with Kim, living in the same house with him, and she wishes for that moment to come true. Kim notices her and smiles, but Sue walks away. He continues with the photo shoot, and once it's done, he sees the bouquet of flowers that was with the bride. He takes them and heads to Sue's place. At the end of the day, Sue is working when Kim knocks on her door. After she opens it, He enters and hands her the bouquet, telling her he wants to see what she looks like holding the flowers. She takes them, and Kim watches her, admiring how beautiful she looks. He kneels down, holds her hand, and tells her that life without her has become impossible. He asks her to live with him forever. Sue is embarrassed and makes an excuse to put the flowers in a vase so they don't wilt. Kim understands her feelings, even though he's a bit surprised by her reaction. He then heads back to his place to talk to his mom, telling her he loves Sue and wants to be with her. His mom, however, knows that Sue is avoiding him and claims to be tired, saying she wants to sleep. Kim is confused, but chooses to let it go. The next day, an emergency meeting is called for the hotel investors, with the excuse that Sue wasn't present at the previous meeting. When the investors arrive, Sue still isn't there, and her mother's secretary, who has been behind many of Sue's problems, tries to sway the votes in favor of Jung. However, Sue arrives just in time and brings forward the only witness who will expose the secretary's actions. The witness, a hotel employee, admits that it was the secretary who caused all the problems at the hotel and blamed them on Sue. The investors are shocked and regret not seeing through the secretary's schemes earlier. The secretary, now embarrassed and nervous, tries to claim that she was only following orders from others, but Sue isn't interested in her excuses. She tells the investors to make their decision after careful consideration and leaves the room. The secretary looks to Jung for help, but Jung abandons her, stating that the issues at the hotel didn't exist when he was in charge. He leaves the meeting and the secretary, now isolated, becomes even more anxious. Sue then meets with her friend and tells her that she found out through the press that Kim is in a relationship with the head of the famous hotel chain, as the photos of them together have been published. Her friend asks her to help get her son a job at the hotel. Sue is shocked and refuses her friend's request, angry at her for asking such a thing. Later, Sue is upset and tries to reach out to Sumo, but she doesn't know her contact details. Sue also learns that Kim is now in a relationship with the hotel's secretary. Sue goes to Kim's friend's shop and asks him to give a gift to the secretary so she can pass it to Kim. The friend takes the gift and hands it over to the secretary. Later, the secretary goes to Sue and gives her the gift. When Sue opens it, she finds a letter from Kim's mother, who dislikes her. The letter contains a phone number and asks Sue to call the number. Sue calls the number and they meet in a location. Kim's mother, who is upset, explains to Sue that she wants her to break up with Kim. She tells Sue that Kim's friends believe he got the job at the hotel because he's dating the hotel's owner. Kim's mother worries that everyone in their neighborhood will think the same way and cause problems for Kim. She starts crying, saying that she doesn't want any more issues for Kim because if anything happens to him, it will break her heart. Sue is deeply moved and cries as well. She goes home feeling confused and torn about what to do. Meanwhile, she meets Kim's father, who asks her to promise him something. They share a happy moment together. The next day, after work, Sue leaves the hotel and heads home, where Kim is waiting to drive her. As they're on the way, Sue thinks deeply about what Kim's mother said and decides she needs to talk to him. She asks him to go somewhere private to tell him something important. Kim is surprised, but they go to a quiet place where Sue nervously admits that they need to break up. Kim is devastated and asks her why. Sue tells him that she wants to end things to avoid causing any problems for him, fearing that her issues will affect his life. Kim tries to convince her, saying he promised to always be there for her and protect her, but Sue is firm in her decision. She gets up to leave, but before she does, Kim grabs her and tells her that he loves her very much. Sue walks away, feeling heartbroken. She goes home and breaks down in tears, while Kim continues calling her, but she doesn't answer. Days pass, and Kim becomes very depressed. His mother notices his sadness and blames herself for causing this situation. She sits down with her husband and confesses that she pushed Sue away to protect Kim from her problems. Kim's father gets very angry, saying that she made the wrong decision without considering how it would affect their son. He worries about how Kim will cope after breaking up with Sue. Kim's mother is devastated and regrets her actions. Kim overhears their conversation and decides to go to Sue. On his way to her house, he calls her repeatedly, but her phone is turned off. He calls the secretary and finds out where Sue is. He quickly goes to the hotel, and as soon as he enters the office, he runs to find Sue. He approaches her and asks why she didn't tell him that she met his mother. Sue pushes him away, explaining that meeting his mother wasn't the real reason she wanted to break up. She tells him the truth. She doesn't want him to get hurt because of her, and she doesn't want his life to change because of her problems. She fears that if he stays with her, his simple and happy life will be ruined. Kim responds by telling her that his life would be more beautiful with her in it. But Sue insists on her decision, leaving him and walking away. Kim is devastated, and he goes home afterward. He sees his mother sleeping and heads to his room, sinking deeper into depression. The next day, he knocks on his father's door, pretending to be okay. He sits down with them to have breakfast. But they both know that their son is upset and depressed because of the breakup. Later, Sue meets with an investor from the hotel and learns that her ex-husband donated his shares in the hotel, and the position of CEO has been returned to her. She tells him that she isn't interested in her ex-husband's shares and asks him to leave them as they are, stating that she doesn't need them. Soon after, her driver enters her office, and they sit together. He asks her why she broke up with Kim, and she explains that it was to protect him from her problems and to avoid disrupting his simple family life. The driver tells her that Kim loved her very much and that his father had told him to stay by her side and never leave her. Sue recalls when Kim was crying and told her that he promised himself to always be there for her. She realizes that it was Kim's father who had advised him to take care of her, and she feels deeply guilty. She doesn't know what to do. Later, at the end of the day, Kim sits at his desk, still in distress about leaving the hotel. He recalls all the beautiful memories he had with Sue, and his mind changes. He goes to her office and tells her that he promised her father that he would never leave her and would stand by her through all her problems. After telling her this, he walks away. Sue is heartbroken because she doesn't know whether to return to him or continue with the breakup. Kim exits the bus and heads toward his house, only to be surprised by his mother waiting for him. He takes her inside to prevent her from getting cold. His mother talks to him and admits that she had hidden the fact that she went to Sue and begged her to break up with him, but she did it out of concern for him. She now realizes she was wrong. Kim holds her hand, reassuring her that he knew all along. The next day, Kim's mother prepares food and takes it to Sue's office, hoping to repair the relationship between her son and Sue. Kim's mother arrives at Sue's office and they sit together. Sue feels extremely awkward, but Kim's mother tries to ease the tension. Kim's mother tells Sue that he loved her very much and apologizes to her, admitting that she made a wrong decision. Sue explains that she didn't break up with him because of her words, and now she feels guilty as well. She didn't want him to go through the same problems she went through. Kim's mother smiles at her, handing her the food she brought, and kindly asks her to visit them at home again. Afterward, Kim's mother leaves, and Sue returns to her house with the food, feeling extremely upset and unsure about what to do. Kim sits in his room, still feeling depressed. He sees a pair of shoes he has kept since the beginning of their relationship. He decides to write her a message and sends the shoes to her office, hoping that she will feel nostalgic and come back to him. The next day, Sue arrives at her office and notices a box on her desk. She asks her secretary who brought it, and the secretary tells her it was from Kim. Sue opens the box and is surprised to find the shoes she wore in Cuba. Inside the box, there's a message that reads, "These shoes are the reason Kim fell in love with you and came back to you. He gave you these shoes so that you can fall for him and come back to him." She begins to tear up, reminiscing about all the beautiful memories they shared, their outings together, and the love they had. She is deeply moved, leaves everything behind, and quickly heads to the place they used to visit together. When she arrives, she sees him there. She approaches him, tears in her eyes, and asks, "If this place didn't exist, where would you have gone?" Kim is surprised to see her. He stands up and walks toward her, incredibly happy that she came back. They speak, and she tells him that she doesn't know how to smile or feel happy unless he is by her side. They talk for a little while, thanking each other for the reunion. Kim gets closer to her and kisses her, and they reconcile. They live a happy life together, and the show comes to an end. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Check out more recaps you'll absolutely love right here.